What if everything you thought you knew about how Rihanna got signed was only half the story? Everyone remembers it. A 16-year-old girl from Barbados walks into a building and walks out a star. Nobody questioned the hour it was done. Nobody thought to ask why a child was still sitting at that table when the rest of the city had long gone to sleep. Nobody asked what was in that room with her. Nobody wanted to know. I was there that night. I carried the folders. I stood against the wall. I watched everything. And I have never spoken about it. Not because I forgot, because some doors, once you understand what lies behind them, you learn to walk past without looking. What happened on the 29th floor that night was not a record deal. It was not a negotiation. It was something far older than Jay-Z, something he didn't create, something he simply knew how to feed. And whatever was in that room with that 16-year-old girl, it wasn't just him. It was patient. It was hungry. It had been waiting in that building long before any of us ever arrived. And that night, it left with everything it came for. I have carried folders into rooms that most people will never see the inside of. I have poured water into glasses for men who never once looked up to acknowledge it. I have stood against walls in meetings where careers were made, where futures were decided, where the entire direction of a human life was determined in the time it takes most people to eat lunch. I have done this for 12 years. And in 12 years, I have learned the single most important rule of this job. The best assistants are furniture. Furniture does not have opinions. Furniture does not have reactions. Furniture does not go home and tell its husband what it saw. Furniture stands against the wall with a notepad and a pen, and it watches and it files and it schedules and it carries and it opens doors and it disappears into rooms, and it says absolutely nothing. You know what I mean? I know you do. You have worked somewhere long enough that you stopped asking questions. You have filed things you did not fully read. You have scheduled meetings you did not fully understand. You have watched things happen across a conference table and made the quiet, private decision to look down at your notepad instead of across the room. You have gone home. You have made dinner. You have sat across from someone who loves you and said fine when they asked how your day was. That is not weakness. That is survival. That is what it means to work inside a machine that is much larger than you and much older than you and has absolutely no interest in what you think about it. I told myself that for 12 years. I believed it for 11. The 29th floor is not like the other floors. I know how that sounds. I know what you are already thinking, but I am not talking about the view or the square footage or the quality of the furniture. I am talking about something physical, something you register in your body before your mind has a chance to explain it away. The carpet up there is dark, the color of something dried and forgotten. Nobody ever commented on it. I noticed it on my first day, and I never stopped noticing it. Sound behaves differently on the 29th floor. Voices do not carry the way they should. They go into the air, and then they simply stop, like the building is absorbing them, like the walls are hungry for them. The lighting is warm, amber, the kind of lighting that is designed to make people feel comfortable and at ease. But it never reaches the far corners of any room up there. No matter the hour, no matter how many lights are on, the corners stay dark. I used to think it was the architecture. I stopped thinking that a long time ago. And the air on the 29th floor is cooler than every other floor in that building. Every single floor. I checked once. I rode the elevator up and down 6 times, pressing my hand against the doors as they open. Every floor, normal. Floor 29, you feel it the moment the doors part. A coolness that has nothing to do with the season. I used to tell myself it was the ventilation system. I told myself a lot of things in that building. The executive conference room sits at the end of the main corridor. Glass walls facing the hallway so that everyone passing can see inside and everyone inside can see out. Long, dark table. high-backed chairs, a city view through the far window that on a clear night makes you feel like you are suspended above the world. From my position against the wall, I could see everything: the table, the hallway, through the glass. And at the far end of that hallway, a floor-to-ceiling window. Beyond that window, a terrace, a balcony ledge, open air, and the city below, and 29 floors of nothing between you and the street. I had walked past that window 100 times. I had never once felt the need to look out of it. I saw her first in the lobby, before the elevators, before the 29th floor, before any of what I'm about to tell you. I have seen hundreds of artists come through that building. I want you to understand that before I tell you what I saw when I looked at her. I have seen the hungry ones and the desperate ones, the ones who would sign anything to escape wherever they came from, the ones who arrived already hollowed out, already shaped by want into something that would fit neatly into whatever container was offered to them. She was none of those things. 16 years old, from Barbados, still carrying the Caribbean in the way she held herself, like the sun had gotten into her posture and decided to stay. She walked into that lobby, and the room did not change. The lighting did not shift. Nothing dramatic happened, but I noticed her eyes. There was a light in them, and I want to be careful here, because I am not speaking in metaphor. I am not reaching for poetry. I am telling you what I saw with my own eyes from 15 feet away in a lobby I had stood in 1,000 times. There was something in her eyes that was warm and specific and alive in a way that most people in that building had stopped being a very long time ago. Something that had not yet learned to protect itself. Something that did not yet know it needed to. I thought one thing, one single thought. Remember this face. I did not know why. I have never been a sentimental person. Sentiment is not a luxury the furniture can afford. But something in me, something older than my 12 years in that building, said remember her with an urgency I did not understand and did not question. I remember her. God help me. I remember everything. We rode the elevator up together, the team, the executives, her people, me in my corner with my folders pressed against my chest like a shield I did not know I needed. She talked the whole way up, laughed at something someone said, stood with her shoulders back and her chin level and the absolute unshakable confidence of someone who has not yet been taught to make herself smaller. I watched her look up at the floor numbers as they climbed. 20, 23, 26, 29. The doors opened. The cool air of the 29th floor came in immediately, the way it always does, like a greeting from something that has been waiting. She stepped out first and looked down the corridor toward the conference room. And she stopped, not dramatically, not in a way that anyone else would have caught. Half a second, maybe less. Just a moment where her body received something that her mind had not yet processed, where something in her recognized something in that hallway that her 16 years had not given her the language to name. Then she smiled, straightened, kept walking. I stood in the elevator doorway and watched her go, and I felt it too. Whatever she felt in that half second, I felt the edge of it, like standing near a fire you cannot see, like hearing a frequency just below the range of sound. I filed it away. That is what the furniture does. I followed her down the hall. Everyone settled, folders distributed, water poured. The careful professional theater of a meeting that everyone in that room understood was already decided. I took my position against the wall. Notepad, pen, invisible. From where I stood, I could see the full length of the hallway through the conference room's glass walls. I could see the floor-to-ceiling window at the end. I could see the dark beyond it. The terrace, the city, the night. I looked at her instead. 16 years old at a table built for people twice her age, still luminous, still whole, still carrying that light in her eyes like she had no idea that this building had spent years learning exactly how to take it. I thought, I hope she stays that way. I have thought that thought before, in this room, at this table. Looking at other faces, I have since trained myself to forget. The door opened. Jay-Z walked in, and I opened my notepad to a fresh page, and I wrote one word at the top. Not his name, not a note, not a reminder. One word I had written at the top of every page in every meeting in this room for longer than I could honestly remember. A word I had always told myself was habit. Again. I have seen powerful men walk into rooms before. I want to make that clear before I tell you about him. I have stood against walls in the presence of senators. I have poured water for men who controlled the financial futures of entire cities. I have been furniture in rooms where decisions were made that most people felt the consequences of without ever knowing the origin. I know what power looks like when it walks through a door. What walked through that door was something different. He did not arrive the way powerful men arrive. There was no performance of it, no adjustment in the room's energy that you could point to and name. He simply came in and sat down, and the room reorganized itself around him the way water reorganizes itself around a stone dropped into it, quietly, completely, without being asked. He greeted her warmly. That was the first thing that unsettled me. Not his presence, not his reputation, the warmth, because I had heard that warmth before, in this room, at this table. Directed at other faces I have since made myself forget, and I had learned, slowly over years, the way you learn things you do not want to know. That warmth in this room was never warmth. It was measurement. He told her she was extraordinary. He told her the world was waiting for her. He told her that what she had, that thing, that quality, that undefinable electricity, could not be taught and could not be manufactured, and that he had been in this industry long enough to know the difference between talent and destiny. I wrote nothing on my notepad. I had heard these words before, this exact sequence, these exact words in this exact order directed at a person sitting in that exact chair. I could have recited them before he finished speaking. And the thing that turned my stomach, the thing I pressed down and filed away and refused to look at directly, was that every single time I had heard them, they had worked. Every single time. Rihanna listened, and she was not naive. I want you to understand that. She was not a wide-eyed girl from a small island who had never encountered a man who wanted something from her. She was 16 and she was sharp, and she pushed back on his compliments with a laugh that said, "I hear you, but I know who I am, and I don't need you to tell me." And I felt something watching her do that, something I had not felt in a very long time in that room. Pride, immediately followed by dread, because I had seen that too. The confidence at the beginning, the sharpness, the laugh that said, "I know exactly what I am walking into." I had seen it in every chair at that table, and I had watched every single time what this room did to it over the hours that followed. I pressed my back against the wall, and I held my notepad, and I told myself to look at the table. My eyes went to the hallway instead. I do not know what made me look. That is the honest answer, and I have turned it over in my mind for more years than I care to count. There was no sound, no movement in my peripheral vision, no logical reason for my eyes to drift from the table to the glass wall to the hallway beyond it. They just went there. The way your eyes go to a dark corner of a room when something in you, something older than thought, decides it needs to know what is in that corner. The hallway was empty. The floor-to-ceiling window at the end was dark. The city beyond it glittered the way New York always glitters at night. Indifferent and relentless and beautiful in a way that has nothing to do with you. And on the terrace beyond that window, in the far corner where the light from the city did not reach, there was a figure. I use that word carefully. Figure. Because what I saw did not have the specificity of a person. It did not have the edges or the weight or the presence of something that belonged to the physical world in the way that you and I belong to it. It existed in the shadow the way a shadow exists, as an absence of light that has somehow learned to have intention. It was not standing. It was not sitting. It was simply there, present in that corner, the way something is present when it has been there long enough that the space has shaped itself around it. I looked around the conference room. Jay-Z was speaking. The executives were nodding. Rihanna was listening, with her chin resting lightly on her hand. The lawyers were looking at their papers. Nobody was looking at the hallway. Nobody was looking at the window. Nobody was looking at the terrace. I looked back. The figure had not moved. But now I could see, in the darkness of that corner, 2 points of faint light. Eyes looking directly at me. Not at the room, not at the table, not at the 16-year-old girl sitting in that chair. At me, specifically, deliberately, with a patience that suggested it had been looking at me for a very long time and was entirely comfortable continuing to do so. I looked down at my notepad. My hand was not shaking. That was the thing that frightened me most in that moment. Not the figure, not the eyes. The fact that my hand was completely still, like some part of me had already accepted what I was seeing, like some part of me had always known it was there and had simply been waiting for the night I finally looked. I wrote nothing. I looked at the table. I kept my eyes on the table. Rihanna paused on a clause midway through the first read of the contract. It was a standard pause. The kind anyone makes when language becomes deliberately complicated. When the words on a page are designed to obscure rather than clarify. She tilted her head slightly, pressed her finger to the line, opened her mouth to ask, sign, barely there, less than a whisper, less than a sound, more like the idea of a word arriving in the space between sounds. My head turned toward the hallway before I could stop it. The figure in the corner of the terrace had not moved. The eyes had not shifted. I looked around the room. Jay-Z was watching Rihanna with an expression of patient attention. The executives had not moved. The lawyers had not looked up. Nobody had heard it. I told myself it was the ventilation system. The building was old. Buildings make sounds. 30 floors of steel and glass and pressurized air make sounds that the human mind will always try to shape into something recognizable. I told myself that. I looked back at my notepad. The word I had written at the top of the page looked back at me. Again. It was maybe an hour into the meeting when Jay-Z said it, not loudly, not with any particular emphasis. The way you might mention the weather or comment on the time. Folded into the conversation so naturally that if you were not paying the specific kind of attention that 12 years of being furniture teaches you, you might have missed it entirely. He gestured toward the hallway window as he spoke. There are 2 ways you leave this building tonight. Through the front door, after you sign this contract, or off that balcony, 29 floors. Rihanna laughed. It was a nervous laugh. The kind that reaches for humor because the alternative is to sit with what was just said and actually feel it. She looked at the people around her to confirm that this was a joke, that this was the kind of thing powerful men in this industry said to seem formidable and theatrical. The people around her smiled. I did not smile. I had heard this line before, word for word, same cadence, same casual delivery, same gesture toward the hallway window. I had heard it in this room, directed at a person sitting in that chair, and I had watched that person laugh the same nervous laugh and look around for the same confirmation. And I had said nothing then either. I looked at the hallway. The figure on the terrace had not moved, but the eyes, those 2 faint points of light in the corner of the dark, were no longer looking at me. They were looking at her. The meeting continued. More clauses, more language, more of the careful, deliberate architecture of a conversation that was never really a conversation. I stood against my wall. I held my notepad. I kept my eyes on the table and away from the hallway, and away from the window, and away from the terrace, and away from the corner where something patient and hungry and ancient was watching a 16-year-old girl with light in her eyes sit at a table she did not yet understand. But I could feel it. even with my eyes down, even with my back pressed flat against the wall. I could feel the eyes, not on my skin, not in the room, inside my chest, like something that had been placed there a long time ago and had only just decided to make itself known. And the worst part, and the part I have never said out loud to a single living person, was that it did not feel like a threat. It felt like a reminder. You already know what this is. You have always known. Look up. I did not look up, not yet. I did not look. By the time the 5th hour settled into the room, I had stopped checking the clock. Time moves differently on the 29th floor. I had noticed that years before I noticed anything else about this building. Not slowly exactly, more like deliberately. Like each minute was being used for something specific and was not going to move on until that something was complete. Like the hours up here had a purpose that the hours everywhere else did not. The water glasses had not been refilled. Nobody had noticed. The city outside the far window had deepened into the kind of dark that only exists in the middle of the night, when even New York has exhaled and gone quiet. The corners of the conference room felt closer than they had at the start of the evening. Not visibly, not in any way I could have pointed to, and measured, just closer. The way a room gets when something inside it has been slowly consuming the available air. Rihanna was still there, still present, still engaged, still, and this is the word I keep coming back to when I think about those early hours, still whole, but I had been watching her the way furniture watches, completely, silently, without the interference of expression or reaction. And I had begun to notice something that I did not have language for yet. The space around her had changed temperature. Not the room, not the air conditioning. The specific pocket of air nearest to her. Cooler now than it had been when she walked in. Like something had moved close to her and was drawing the warmth out of the space she occupied. Slowly, patiently. The way cold works when it is serious about what it is doing. I pressed my back into the wall and I held my notepad and I said nothing. Jay-Z made the request the way he made everything, without urgency, without theater, with the specific casual precision of a man who has never once in his life needed to raise his voice to get what he wanted. Before we finalize, I'd love to hear you, right here, right now. Rihanna did not hesitate. This was her element. This was the place she lived. She pushed back her chair and she stood, and something in the room shifted immediately. The way a room shifts when the most alive thing in it decides to remind everyone of that fact. I had seen this request made before. Every artist, every signing, always the performance before the pen came out. I had filed it for years as standard practice. Confirmation of talent, due diligence, dressed up as appreciation. But standing against that wall in that hour, I looked at it for the first time without the filter of 12 years of practice not noticing. There was no instrument, no track, no setup of any kind, no microphone, no preparation. Just a 16-year-old girl standing at the head of a long dark table in a room full of people who had gone very quiet, an offering, presented on an empty altar, with nothing between her and whatever was receiving it. She sang, a cappella, raw, no armor of production between her voice and the air it moved through. And I want to tell you what happened to that room when she opened her mouth, because I have never found the right words for it, and I am not sure the right words exist. The room stopped, not the people. The room, the air ceased its movement. The ambient sounds of the building, the hum of the elevator shaft, the distant mechanical breath of the ventilation, the low constant murmur of a skyscraper existing, fell away completely, like the building itself had gone still to listen. Her voice filled that space, and the light in her eyes blazed. I felt it from across the room, warmth that started in my sternum and spread outward, like something had been briefly returned to me that I had not realized was missing. She was extraordinary. She was 16 years old, and she was the most extraordinary thing I had ever witnessed in that room. And through the hallway glass, in the dark beyond the floor-to-ceiling window, the figure on the terrace leaned forward, just slightly, just enough. The way something leans when it has finally found what it has been waiting for, when recognition moves through it, when hunger becomes specific. My knuckles went white around my notepad. I did not look away. She sat back down. The contract came back out, and the room that had briefly been something close to sacred folded itself back into business. She asked about creative control. From the terrace, sign, clearer than the first time. No ambiguity, no possibility of ventilation or architecture or the sounds old buildings make. A word, deliberate, placed. I looked at the hallway. The figure had settled back into the shadow, but the eyes were brighter now, more present, like something had been fed and the feeding had made it more real. I looked around the conference room. Jay-Z was listening to her question with patient attention. The executives were looking at their papers. The lawyers were looking at their papers. Nobody had heard it. I was alone in this. I had been alone in this since the moment I first looked at that terrace, and I understood now that the aloneness was not accidental. You do not let the furniture hear things you want kept quiet unless you are certain the furniture will stay furniture. They were certain about me. They had been certain for 12 years. She asked about her publishing rights. Sign. I felt it arrive in my chest before it reached my ears. A pressure that was not painful. That was almost, and this is the word I hate most when I think about that night, familiar. Like a hand placed flat against the inside of my rib cage by something that had done it before. Something that knew exactly where to press. I looked at Rihanna. She had no idea. She was 16 years old and sharp and alive. And she had no idea that the room she was sitting in had been built for exactly this. That the table and the chairs and the carpet and the lighting and the cool air and the glass walls and the hallway and the window and the terrace and the shadow in the corner had all been arranged. Carefully, deliberately, over a very long time. For exactly this moment. For exactly her. She pushed back on the exclusivity terms. Hard, clearly, with the full force of a 16-year-old who knows her own value and is not afraid to say so out loud in a room full of adults who are counting on her not to. And I felt something break open in my chest, watching her do it. Something that had been sealed for a long time. Something that felt dangerously close to the thing I had trained myself never to feel in this building. Say something. From the terrace. Sign. Not a whisper. Not a suggestion. A word delivered with the full weight of something that does not make requests. I stopped breathing. Complete stop. No air in, no air out. My back flat against the wall and my notepad against my chest and no air moving through me at all. I looked at the hallway. The eyes on the terrace were fully visible now. Both of them. Steady, unblinking. Burning with a patience that was somehow more terrifying than urgency would have been. Because urgency would have meant it could be denied. Patience means it already knows the outcome. And then I understood something that turned the floor beneath me into something I no longer trusted. The whispers were not directed at Rihanna. She could not hear them. She had never been able to hear them. The whispers were not for her. They were for the room, for the lawyers and the executives and the assistants standing against the walls with their notepads and their 12 years of practiced silence. For every person in that room who could see what was happening and was choosing, actively, repeatedly in real time, not to intervene. We were not witnesses. We were instruments, and we had been playing the same note for years. I tracked the dimming the way you track something you know you're going to have to carry. Hour one, she laughed at something, full and unguarded, the laugh of someone who still lives entirely inside herself. Hour two, the laugh was still there, but it arrived late. Half a second behind where it should have been, like it had further to travel. Hour three, the laugh was gone, She was still present, still engaged, but the laugh had left and it did not come back. Hour 4, her posture changed. The shoulders came in slightly. Not collapse, not defeat. Something more precise than that. Adjustment. Her body beginning to understand the shape of the thing it was being asked to become. Hour 5, she looked at the contract and I saw it. The light in her eyes was still there. I need you to understand that. It did not go out. It did not disappear. It was still there, warm and specific and alive. But something was being laid over it, slowly, carefully. The way you cover a flame not to extinguish it, but to own it. A hand pressed gently over something that was never going to be allowed to burn freely again. The flame still burned, but it no longer burned for her. She looked at the contract for a long time, and then one tear came, fast. She caught it before it reached her cheek, pressed it away with one finger, and looked back at the page like it had never happened. From the terrace, sign, soft, almost gentle, the way a voice gets when it has already won and cruelty is no longer necessary. Like a hand on the shoulder, like a comfort offered by something that has no business offering comfort. I felt it move through my ribcage like a current that had always known the way. I looked at the pen in her hand. I looked at the contract on the table. I looked at the hallway, the eyes steady and patient and satisfied in their corner of the dark. And I thought the thought I will carry for the rest of my life. I could have said something. I could have stood up from this wall and opened my mouth and said, "Stop. Wait. Look at what is happening in this room. Look at what you are asking this child to give away." I could have said something. The pen moved toward the paper, and I said nothing. The room did not change when the pen made contact. The people did not change. The city outside did not change. But the light in her eyes, in the single instant the ink touched the page, shifted. Not disappeared, not extinguished, shifted. Like something that had been pointing in one direction had been turned, gently, permanently, without her knowledge or consent, to point in another. And somewhere in the walls or the floor or the air or the dark corner of a terrace, 29 floors above a city that never stopped moving, something exhaled, not with relief, with satisfaction. And I felt that exhale move through my own lungs, like it came from me, like it has always come from me, like I have been exhaling at this exact moment, in this exact room, at this exact table for 12 years, and I have never once made a sound. The room settled the way rooms settle when something has been completed. Not celebration, not relief, completion. The specific exhale of a space that has been holding something for hours and has finally been permitted to release it. Handshakes happened. Congratulations were offered in voices that were slightly too warm. Someone laughed at something that was not funny, and everyone else laughed with them because that is what you do when a room needs to believe it is celebrating. I stood against my wall and I watched Jay-Z move through it. Gracious, warm, the perfect performance of a man who has just done something generous for a young artist who deserved it. He shook hands, he smiled, he said the right things in the right order, and he never once looked at the hallway window. Not once, not tonight. I stood there and I counted back through every signing I had witnessed in that room, and I understood. With the specific cold clarity of something you cannot unfeel once you have felt it, that he had never looked at that window. Not in 12 years, not in a single meeting. There are 2 reasons a person never looks at something: because it is not worth looking at, or because they already know exactly what is there. I began counting the artists, different faces, different years, the hungry ones and the luminous ones and the ones who arrived already half gone. I stopped at 11. Because 11 was enough. 11 was more than enough to understand that what I had been present for, what I had stood against walls and held notepads and said nothing through, was not a series of record deals. It was one thing, repeated, refined, perfected. The performance was never about talent. It was an offering. The soul presented before the vessel was prepared. The contract was not a business document. It was the vessel itself. And the signature, that small, final, irreversible mark, was not agreement. It was surrender, given willingly, unknowingly, completely. And every person in that room, every lawyer and executive and assistant standing against every wall, was not a witness. We were instruments. A ritual requires witnesses to be complete, and witnesses who say nothing are not innocent bystanders. They are participants. I had been participating for 12 years. The room emptied. I began collecting folders. I kept my head down. I kept my movements small. I was being furniture. I was trying to disappear the way I always disappear. I looked up. The room was empty except for me. And Jay-Z standing at the far end of the table, not moving toward the door, not checking his phone, just standing, facing the hallway window, looking at my reflection in the glass. I did not move. He spoke without turning around. You saw it tonight. Not a question. I held my folders against my chest and I said nothing. Most people never see it, even after years in this building. A pause that had no discomfort in it. You've been seeing it for a while now, haven't you? Not a question. He turned and looked at me directly for the first time all evening. Not the way he looked at Rihanna, not with measurement or warmth or the performance of either, with something flat and certain and so old it had stopped needing a name. He picked up his jacket, moved toward the door, passed me without stopping, and at the threshold, without looking back, he said it. I see you. A beat, the longest beat. I saw you the whole time. And he was gone. I stood in the empty conference room and I understood, arriving now with the full weight of everything, that I was never invisible, that the furniture was never invisible, that I was not placed in this room by accident or by 12 years of professional competence. I was placed here because something in me, something the building recognized before I ever did, made me the perfect instrument. Quiet enough to stay, perceptive enough to see, broken enough to say nothing. I slipped out, down the hallway, past the window. I did not look at the terrace, but I felt it anyway. The eyes, not on my skin, inside my chest, pressing outward, like a goodbye, like a welcome. I could no longer tell the difference. Rihanna was already in the bathroom, both hands flat on the counter, staring at her own reflection. Did you feel that? She said. In that room. Something in that room. I looked at her in the mirror. The light was still there, dimmer, covered, but still present, still fighting, still hers, barely. Feel what? 3 words, flat, automatic, practiced. She held my gaze in the mirror. 1 second, 2, 3. Nothing, she said. Never mind. She walked out. I stood at the sink until the cold water went numb against my hands. I went home, made dinner, said fine when my husband asked how my day was. I will be back tomorrow. I have always been back tomorrow. Some nights the eyes find me through the hallway glass. Not hungry, not cruel, just recognizing. I see her sometimes, on screens, on stages, everywhere. The light never went out. It just doesn't belong to her anymore. You stayed until the end. That means something. It means you already know that what happens in rooms like that, one doesn't stay in those rooms. It follows. If you want to know what else follows, what else happens in buildings like that one, on floors like that one, to voices like hers, like, comment, subscribe. And for those of you who want to go deeper, who want the stories that don't make it to the main channel, the ones too unsettling for a public feed, become a member. Exclusive videos, unseen horrors, the stories they don't want told. They're waiting for you. I'll see you in the dark.